Hello and welcome back to another episode of Salmon's Pizzeria. Another weekend has passed, and so we have another roundup of Premiership football to talk about. Today, I am joined by our Staggy representative, Peter. How are you?
Football aside, which is becoming more and more one of my favourite and most used phrases, doing pretty well. Yeah, thanks, Alex. It's a pleasure to be back on the pizzeria.
And a newcomer, our second Celtic fan to appear, Jack. How are you, Jack?
I'm doing well, Alex. Yeah, I'm feeling good after the result of the weekend. I felt like we got away with something. It was quite a shock almost, because Killie were piling on the pressure. But I'll take a wee 2-0 win.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think we'll just get into that then. We'll start with Celtic, who sit at the top of the Premiership after another win, 2-0 away to Kilmarnock, where others have already faltered this season. Jack, as you said, maybe hard fought for 3 points.
Yeah, so I felt like it was a hard game by the looks of it. It's actually the stat that's been going around this week is it's the most shots Celtic have faced in a match since like the rebranding of the Scottish Premiership. So we faced 19 shots and surprisingly didn't concede any. So it's like by looking at it, you looked at the result 2-0, it maybe could have been different.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll just stick with you on that one. Kilmarnock obviously took all 3 points against Rangers, and this is something that people like to watch out for is the kind of crossover. You can't really judge so much until both teams have played the same games, and this is, I think, potentially one of the first crossovers, anyways, and always a hard place to go for Celtic, especially under Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of getting over that hurdle, especially in such difficult circumstances where Kilmarnock really were themselves and came into that game, is maybe the biggest 3 points so far this season for Celtic?
I'd say it's definitely up there for the biggest 3 points of the season. We've had a couple hard fought games. We had our game at Dingwall a couple of weeks ago where we fought back from 1-0 down. We were 1-0 down till 76 minutes and we scored 2 goals in the last 15. That was a hard fought game. Kilmarnock, also a really hard fought game. It's probably up there for the biggest 3 points that we've got this season, especially how attacking Kilmarnock were against us and that we managed to still keep the clean sheet. But I've got to say, I've going after that game and seeing the result and seeing how the team was playing, I'd say I'm very happy with a 2-0 win.
Yeah, and Peter, as Jack touched on there, Celtic did fall behind in Dingwall to your team, Ross County, the only team to have taken the lead against Celtic domestically so far this season. Do you think that was maybe kind of on the minds of Kilmarnock? There is only one team to have gone ahead against them, and then that was even too soon because 14 minutes was enough in the end for Celtic to turn it around.
Yeah, I would say so, and I think everyone knows, how tough a place it is to go to Rugby Park. Everyone will be talking about the surface and things like that. And I mean, when you look at the result on paper without having actually looking at any of the background, you would assume it was a fairly routine 2-0 win for Celtic. But as you have touched on, to be honest, I think Kilmarnock will be kicking themselves that they didn't take more out of the game, even if that means just scoring a goal. You see that the numerous amount of missed chances that they had, on any other day against any other team. If Schmeichel wasn't in such good form, then I think they probably would have managed to sneak a draw because I think Celtic and Killie had the same number of shots on target by the end of the match. I was a real end-to-end game, and yeah, I mean, I think maybe a bit of a sigh of relief for Celtic that they managed to get a result, considering the Killie performance, and as we'll speak about soon, especially considering the Aberdeen performance as well.
Yeah, there is that, and yeah, Jack, as Peter mentioned there, Peter said that Kasper Schmeichel is on superb form and he was on absolute fire in this game. I think he made 6 saves, kept the clean sheet, and was very important in moments. Obviously, Marley Watkins hit the post. Celtic had quite a few frights, but they go into halftime ahead. Was it Cal McGregor looking for Ida to get in the end of it, or was he just kind of going, look, we've got not much left, so maybe just send us forward?
I think, like, based off the goal, Alex, I felt that off the initially seeing it when I was watching it, that it was more like a cross into the box. And I feel like Ida's obviously just mistimed it, and we've got really lucky that it's ended up in the back of the net. But it's a big, obviously, scoring right before half time, like, psychologically, is like one of the best times in the game to score because you're going into half time with the leading advantage. And I've got to say I do have a slight feeling that it was more across and that we've just got extremely lucky that it's ended up in the back of the net.
But do you think as well, just on that, do you think Robbie McCrory's obviously wrong-footed by the fact that Ida doesn't get a touch? Do you think if he does get a touch that maybe Celtic don't score that?
Yeah, that could be a different point because maybe if Ida gets a touch, he might instead of going in the far post, Ida might have tried to knock it to like the right hand post, and maybe the story could have been different, and Celtic maybe wouldn't have scored. But to score it basically the last kick of the game before half time, I felt like was like so almost like so like it, it was like the feeling just like changed almost after we scored, and we are like, all right, finally the pressure's like taken off us a bit. But felt like we definitely got away lucky with that.
Yeah, Peter, you and I have both seen what a first goal means to Celtic
Yeah,
this season and how that turns games. But Kilmarnock came out for the second half and probably started the stronger. They survived one chance where Nicholas Kuhn probably could have put and probably should have put Celtic 2-0 up. But after that, it was back to being, a little bit of basketball game, as Jack said. And Kilmarnock maybe should have got an equaliser and maybe even had the potential to get a couple goals before Celtic eventually get their second.
Yeah, I think it was classic Killie in the way that it was kind of never say die. And even as you said there, Jack, I think that the thing about when Celtic score and the feeling changes, I think that's quite common. And as you mentioned, I think that was quite similar to what happened when you faced us in Dingwall. As soon as that first goal goes in, the tide does kind of
yeah,
change. So I think Killie deserve a massive amount of credit for dealing with that for so long, and for the fact it did take, until much later on in the game until Kuhn managed to wrap up the win. But I think, Killie have probably been, they would say themselves, I think, a bit too inconsistent for where they would want to be this season.
yeah,
But I think, with a performance like that, I think, despite it being a 2-0 loss and no points picked up, that's probably as a positive performance you'll see against the champions this season, I would say.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry, Jack, on you go.
No, oh, thank you. It's I feel like when you're definitely looking at playing like other teams in the league, when they're playing Celtic and Rangers, they're probably going into the game thinking, all right, if we can just play as well as we can and see how the game goes, that'll be a positive. And there's definitely positives Kilmarnock can take from getting a 2-0 defeat, but being still in the game, I'd say, like the full 90 minutes. Like you've seen, like there's been moments in the season, like Aberdeen the other week in the semi final. As soon as Celtic get a couple goals into them, they fell apart. But Kilmarnock like kept themselves together in the game, and they kept up with Celtic. And I feel like they're probably unlucky to have lost 2-0 after putting in like such a good effort like throughout the whole 90 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a fair point. Is on a different day, it's a different scoreline. It's maybe even if they're feeling fortunate, a very strong performance from Kilmarnock could have seen them win 2-0. But Celtic do take the 3 points, and you'd imagine that there's probably going to be worse performances, like you said, Peter, from opponents that will maybe maybe trouble Celtic a little bit more. Just before we move on from this game, then. A couple of refereeing decisions, but just one we'll touch on, and I'll ask you both for the opinion of it. Rio Hatate sees yellow. It goes to VAR for see if it's a red card, and yeah, it's quite a high tackle. Jack, how did you see this one?
Yeah, I felt like Hitati at the time was definitely, after seeing the replay, was really lucky to not receive a red card. It's kind of, I feel like if you're catching someone that high up at the knee, it's like almost certain that, especially with the studs being out, that it could be a red card. I felt like we'll get really lucky that it hasn't been a red card. But it's obviously at the time the referees initially made a yellow card decision, but I would say it maybe should have been upgraded to a red card. But what's your opinion on it, like, Peter?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn in two minds because I agree with you that I think the area where the tackle is, it's a high tackle, but I think the force is probably what's made it stay as a yellow card because once his foot reaches, the player, once the ball's kind of bypassed, the force isn't, what I would describe as overly excessive. But again, look, there's been an amount of controversy in refereeing decisions this season that I think, depending on the referee, maybe it goes another way.
Yeah,
But I think the less said on that, the better. But slightly on the fence with that one. But can definitely see both points of view. But again, yeah, I think maybe Celtic have got lucky there
yeah,
that it was only a yellow.
Yeah, it's certainly, as you said, it's certainly been given as a red before, and probably before this season. However, that's not to say it's the right call because there has been plenty of wrong calls already. But we shall move on to the surprise package of the season that just keeps surprising. Aberdeen took on Dundee at another packed out Pittodrie. And yeah, the first half ends 0-0, and it was all in the second half as Aberdeen run out 4-1 winners. Peter, it's kind of become a late show when needed from Aberdeen, but they just took over that second half.
Yeah, and I think this was a really important game for Aberdeen as well, considering the absolute pasting which Celtic delivered them in the semi-final. I think it was kind of, maybe a few people would have imagined that this was bubble burst for Aberdeen, magical season over, and kind of back to reality. But I think that performance in the second half definitely shows that that is not the case, and that maybe, in fact, they are more capable of going and challenging for the title than people thought. Because as a county fan, I've had my fair few 6-0 defeats, and it's very hard to psychologically bounce back from. And I think to have done that so well, not only with a win but a 4-1 win, is pretty spectacular. So yeah, I think credit to Aberdeen. And I mean, you mentioned kind of the late show there, but I think that just makes it even more special. The fact that they have so much faith in everyone in their whole squad. Like even Duke didn't even bother showing up for pre-season, and he's ripping defenders apart. It's incredible. I am so envious of Aberdeen because it's just a couple of seasons ago we were, I was feeling like we're on par with Aberdeen. They're rubbish. Now look at them. How times change, eh?
Yeah, and Jack, as I
yeah,
said and as Peter said there, we have seen a lot of late goals from them this season, and it's kind of almost that Celtic feeling you get, where Celtic can be drawing a game or losing a game with 14 minutes to go, as we have already talked about, and they will turn it around and they will win it, and you kind of get that feeling from Aberdeen
yeah,
now,
from
so it's
Aberdeen.
pretty special.
Yeah, because I know Aberdeen, they've scored late in a couple games to win them. Like, you had the Dundee United game a couple of weeks ago where they scored with, I think it was 8 minutes to go. Uh, I feel like Jimmy Tilleen's got the mentality for the Aberdeen players, like the never say, never die attitude, where they just keep fighting, and they always seem to get that late goal, which is so good to see. From a neutral point of view, probably not from my Celtic fan kind of view, but from a neutral point of view, the fact that Aberdeen are this far into the season, keeping up with Celtic, they're still unbeaten. Like, it's almost like unheard of, like, to be this far into the season and Aberdeen still have won every game apart from a 2 each draw at Parkhead.
Yeah, and that's it. And Peter Jimmy Tilleen has started really well. He's brought in his own players, and one of which was a struggling Kevin Nisbet, which is fair to say, who got his move to Millwall after being a prolific goal scorer up here, and he is return to that. Yeah, you're no stranger to his late goals after he took all 3 points in Dingwall. We seem to be talking about that a lot. But he does it again, and I think Jimmy Tulin has since come out and said that is his best performance for Aberdeen. Yeah, they had a strong kind of start to the season with Papi Gay scoring and never stopped scoring, but then he got an injury, and the question was, where would the goals come from? The answer seems to be all over the pitch, but Kevin Nisbet is popping up with a fair few too.
Yeah, 100%. I've been very impressed with him, and I think it was maybe a bit disappointing to see him stagnate as much as he did when he finally got that big move south, because obviously he was, pushing for it a lot and was always asking to be transfer listed, etc., when he was at Hibs, and then to kind of flop was maybe, a little bit embarrassing for him. But to come back up and to kind of hit the ground running the way he has, and he's like you said, he's had to buy his time a wee bit with the form of others around him. But not only is he knocking in the goals when it matters. I mean, that pass for Bazoyan's goal was just ridiculous. And just he's looking back to his best, and I am sure he will be desperate to get back in that Scotland squad as well. And he's probably well on his way to doing so, I would say.
Yeah, well, I think I was going to bring that point up. I was going to say, do we think he was maybe slightly unlucky, especially with the inclusion of nor fit nor firing, not fit nor firing Lawrence Shanklin. So yeah, but I will stick with you, Peter, and I will ask, how long can this Aberdeen fairy tale continue?
It's a tough one. Do you know what? I think I'm not saying they're going to go and win the league, but I think that they have enough of a feeling and enough of a momentum that they can take this run into late into the season where they could maybe ask questions. I might look like an idiot and they might fall off straight away now, but I think, like I mentioned earlier, the way they bounced back from such a heavy defeat and the way they went to Celtic Park and got a draw, when they play Celtic again, it's going to be at Pittodrie. That's a huge game. If they can get to then still within touching distance of Celtic, then I see no reason why they can't, take it right into the final few weeks of the season and maybe potentially split the Old Firm. And that's a bold thing to say. But I think from what I've seen of Aberdeen this season, they play good football. They're very good at the back. They score goals, and I mean, their manager Tulin has just got everyone believing. And I think the thing you need more than ability on the pitch to do something like that is a feeling and a belief. It screams Leicester City. And that's what they had as well. When they started going on the run and no one really believed it, and then it got to the stage where it was like, oh wow, they actually might do it. So you never know. You never know. I've put out some bull shouts there, so hopefully they don't come back to bite me, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I think it was maybe this time last month or 2 months ago, people were saying, yeah, well, they hadn't played anybody, and it come to this run of games, which I'm just going to mention here, that they had Dundee away, then Hearts at home, Celtic away, then Dundee United at home, Rangers at home, Celtic in the Scottish League Cup semi-final, Dundee at home. Their next three games are away to St Mirren, away to Hibs, away to Hearts, and then home to Celtic. It's not been an easy run already, and it's not getting any easier, Jack, but they'll have full belief that they'll go into that Celtic game in 4 games' time and be on the same points as them.
Yeah, I think Aberdeen's aim will to be to take 9 points from like three historically very difficult away games. We know that it's the Smiza and Paisley is always a hard place to go for teams like Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs. I've seen many times Aberdeen. I know it wasn't this season, but last season equalised with a last minute penalty. But I feel like if Jimmy Tullin's going to be, his mindset will be to take 9 points from all three of those games and go into the game on the 4th of December leveling points with Celtic, or even a couple points ahead of Celtic, because in Celtic's next 3 games we've got 3 games that are some would say quite hard. We've got Hearts away at Tynecastle on the Saturday night, which is always a hard game. And no matter where Hearts are, even though they're down at the bottom end of the table, we always know a trip to Tynecastle is a hard game. But I feel like we've got Ross County at home just before the Aberdeen game on the Wednesday night, and then we've also got our European game against Club Brugge in the Wednesday before the Ross County game. So I think it's going to be a big, almost 10 days or so for Brendan Rodgers to go into that Aberdeen game and prepare for what is going to be a very hard game to win.
Well said. Yeah, and we'll move on from the top two to Rangers. I feel like this conversation could be quite short. If you guys have watched the game or the highlights, there isn't too many notes to talk about. We'll start with Rangers 1. Managed to close that gap from 12 points back to 9, which is just crazy to say at this stage of the season. And Cyril Dessers made it 3 in 3, I think, after the game in Olympiacos, where he scores 1 but misses 2 massive chances. Missed another one against Motherwell last weekend. Probably missed any chances that he could have had yesterday. A couple of days ago, bar the goal, he did say, if I was scoring every game or scoring 3 goals every game, I wouldn't be at Rangers. Well, that's 3 in 3 for him, and I'm sure a few Rangers fans would be quite happy to wave him goodbye, Peter.
Yeah, listen, I've been a bit of a defender of Dessers, to be fair, because, you know, as much as he does miss chances, yeah, but he does score goals, and I think that's maybe coming from the point of view from a fan of a smaller team where the expectation is obviously much less. Because, you know, as you said, 3 in 3. I mean, it's a great return, but then you don't have to do too much digging to see that maybe it should have been 6 in 3 or 7 in 3. And, you know, when a team like Rangers create as many chances as they do, then I guess the onus is on the guy who's playing up top to put the ball in the back of the net. And, you know, as you said, some would argue more than he is doing so. But yeah, I mean, 1-0 win, let's be honest, not a great game. The early, you know, when Rangers get an early goal, you know, from a neutral fan point of view, you kind of think that kills the game straight away. But again, I had hopes that maybe they would kind of flex their muscles and show, like, we are Rangers, we are the second best team in Scotland, as they'll be thinking, and they maybe would have tried to go and put lots more goals past Hearts, who are, as Jack mentioned, down the bottom of the table. But to be fair, Hearts came back into it quite well. Had a couple of their own chances as well, to be fair. But yeah, I think not the most exciting game of the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a big one in there, Jack, for Hearts. As Peter says there, it's Vargas who goes through and probably most definitely has to score. I think having spoke to Adam, our Hearts fan, at the weekend, and Scott likewise, I think both of them were certainly cursing his name because Rangers were there for the taking.
Yeah, I think especially right now, Phil Clement, the Rangers manager, is under a lot of pressure, especially sitting 9 points behind Celtic and Aberdeen. But the Hearts were, I'd even say, unlucky. They had a good couple chances. They were through 1-on-1 with Butland after a bad back pass from John Souttar in the first half, which Jack Butland done very well to recover from John Souttar's mistake. But Hearts hitting the post in the second half, I felt like Hearts could almost say that they were unlucky to come away from that game with dropping 3 points. I felt like it was probably, if Hearts had taken their chances, they could have came away with a draw at Ibrox.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned one manager there, Jack. We'll stick with you and we'll go on to the other one. Neil Critchley has obviously had a decent start to life at Tynecastle. Nobody predicted it to be perfect, and in fact, a few people predicted it to go the other way altogether. But started strong in Europe. A couple of okay results in the league, and I don't think he'll be bitterly disappointed with the performance, maybe the result, but I think he'll be quite happy with the way his team conducted themselves at Ibrox.
Yeah, I felt like, Phil Clement obviously got a hard draw away at Olympiacos, and he's doing quite well at the minute, especially since he had a hard game at Hampden last weekend against Motherwell, and then a tough game at Olympiacos, which are they're the Conference League winners. It's always it's going to be a hard place to go for them, which they done. I feel like they done very well to get a draw out of that game. And then, although it's scrappy against Hearts, you got to remember that at least they've taken the 3 points because like you could play like shocking and end up coming away with, if you play shocking and come away with 3 points, arguable, 100% that's better than playing brilliant and then only getting a draw. So I feel like even though that Phil Clement is under a lot of pressure, he's still just dragging Rangers just over the line.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, Peter, Neil Critchley has had an okay start to life at Hearts. Like I say, I think a few predicted it to go a bit poorer than it has, and he started pretty strongly in Europe. I think they were unlucky to get a result to get no result on Thursday against Heidenheim, and he'll probably feel the same to get no result against Rangers at Ibrox. So that's something that Hearts fans can maybe take a little bit of confidence going forward from, because they were certainly going in the wrong direction before.
Yeah, listen, definitely. By all means, they're definitely playing better football than they were under Stephen Naismith. And strange, I think it's a bit strange as well, because obviously Critchley's come in and is playing a 4-4-2, which is something you don't see very often anymore. And although it's quite a fluid 4-4-2, I wouldn't suggest that they really have the perfect players to kind of suit that shape at the moment. I mean, there's only really one out-and-out winger in the Hearts squad, which is nearly said James Forrest there, doing an Ian Crocker, Alan Forrest, and so yeah, I think taking that into consideration, they're doing okay. I think they'll be fine this season. I don't think they'll be threatened with relegation. I don't think they're going to go and cut the gap back to being in the top three as they were last season, but. The key thing for me with Hearts is that they need to get Jan Danda into the team.
Well, do you know what I was just about to ask? You're saying there you don't think they'll get relegated, but aren't you hoping that they will, so maybe he'll return?
Well, I was actually more hoping for maybe a wee January loan back north to Dingwall. I feel like when we move on to talking about the county game, there's a distinct thing that I will mention, and he would solve exactly that. But in all seriousness, I do think that if they manage to fit Yandand into the team, I genuinely believe that their performances would improve. I genuinely believe he's that good. Blair Spittle's been playing and doing very well, and he's kind of more taken the limelight as the summer signing. But if Critchley was ever willing to kind of stow away from that solid 4-4-2, then I think there could be maybe a free-flowing Hearts attack somewhere down the line that consisted of Jan Danda and Blair Spittle. But yeah, that's the county fan coming out in me.
Well, since you've asked so kindly, we will move on to Ross County's game at the weekend. As we move down the table, all of the top four got 3 points. And on this occasion, Dundee United came away with 3 goals. Peter, we were talking before about the poor pies, but what about the poor players of Ross County?
Yeah, not sure in a toss-up which would come out on the bottom there, putting neck and neck, to be honest. But it's certainly not a result I was expecting, considering our past 3 games, 2 clean sheets in 2 prior to heading into this one, and a victory over Kilmarnock, albeit they did have 10 men, but still we did well to turn it round from 1-0 down. There was a positive feeling despite our terrible away record. I think I had kind of felt that a 0-0 at the Smiza Stadium, as Jack mentioned, tough place to go. I think getting a 0-0 there was kind of, in my eyes, a good boundary to go and to go and try and break that 437 days without an away win in the Scottish Premiership. But and at half time, to be fair, I thought we might do it because it was a decent enough first half. Not much goal-mouth action from our point of view, but keeping Dundee United at bay. And, I thought a couple of tweaks here and there, and we might be able to create a couple more chances and take the game to them. But boy, I was wrong.
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Dundee United because I don't think Peter's going to want to praise them too much. But yeah, another 3 goals and Jim Goodwin, who I talked about on last week's episode as probably one of the favourites to be sacked first. They came up last season and Dundee United fans were still calling for him to go. They were saying if he leads us out, we will be guaranteed bottom. And yeah, you probably couldn't have predicted that they'd be in 4th right now.
Yeah, so Dundee United right now, it's like quite a shock that how well they're playing. But you've got to remember they are only 3 points behind Rangers in 3rd place. So even if Dundee United were to catch up on Rangers, they could possibly overtake them. But going off their performance on Saturday, yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. I felt like going into half time, as Peter was saying, Ross County maybe would have been feeling that they're doing quite well, but they've done really well, Dundee United, to get out in the second half and obviously getting their goal 17 minutes after half time to get themselves ahead, and then doubling that lead 10 minutes later. So I feel like it's been a solid performance from Dundee United, and they're definitely starting to close in on Rangers and close in on that gap, and maybe they'll take 3rd place in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and Peter, I'm sorry because I'm going to have to make you praise Dundee United a little bit here, but it's been a really, really strong start for a couple of their players, and Lucas Stevenson has been superb and has certainly been an answer going forward more than once now. Likewise, Sam Dalby was almost expected to score quite a few. Started not so great, and I think Stu said he wasn't sure if he was ever going to get his first, and now he can't stop scoring either.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I'm the same as Jack. Been quite shocked about just how well they've done. And you think back to the first game of the season, the Dundee Derby, and they did come flying at the traps. I was maybe thought that was just kind of early season. It was a derby. You're always going to go and give everything, but yeah, fair play to them. They've kept up the level of performance for the most part, and they'll be delighted with sitting in 4th. I don't think any Dundee United fan would have predicted that coming straight back into the league. So yeah, I mean, fair play to them. And the difference at half time was that they wanted to win. They stepped up their tempo. They changed their shape ever so slightly to have their fullbacks higher. And we couldn't deal with it. They put constant balls into the box, and yeah, it was really, really difficult for County to deal with. So yeah, I mean, you have to hold your hands up and say fair play to Jim Goodwin and Dundee United.
Ross County sit level on points with Kilmarnock. Not too far off the bottom. I think they're 4 points clear of Hibs. A few fans on Twitter, Peter, saying that maybe it's time for more questions to be asked of Don Killie. When we spoke at the start of the season, your goals were to avoid another playoff, as your heart could not take it. Do you think Don Killie can steer the ship?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's far too early to be brandishing around those kind of those claims that he should go, or questions getting asked, I think is fair enough. But I would say more specifically of the away record, I think that's a separate thing in itself, and that needs to be dealt with. Maybe, I think we need to look at maybe like routines, away day routines, and maybe even travel times and things like that. And we do need to get that sorted, because I mean, if we go on any further without an away win, then it just becomes more and more of a kind of monkey on the back, if you will. But no, I'm fully behind Don Cowie. Completely believe that he's the man to keep us in the Scottish Premiership for another season. Seen enough from his management that we can do that. I do think in January he will look to the market. I think he'll be thinking himself that we do need additions. We've got a real lack of creativity. And a real lack of width. We don't have a single natural winger in the squad at the moment, and that really leaves us, kind of tactically, there's only a few things we can do with the team really due to that, and I think that is costing us big time. And the shape, I think I agree, is the right shape to be playing a 5-3-2, but the issue is when you end up behind in games and you're chasing games, we have nothing really coming off the bench, to be frankly honest, that can seriously flip a game other than Alex Samuel with his pace and power. But yeah, we have a real lack of width and pace throughout the team. And it is concerning. And as you mentioned, to be just 4 points off bottom, it's not ideal. I think we started the season, maybe with some good results, hoping that we might be able to push on and finish a bit higher than we have done the last few seasons. By all means, it's still early days, and as I said, I'm completely behind Don Cowie, but yeah, there's definitely things we can improve on.
Where's Willie Akio when you need him?
Oh, man.
We will swiftly move on from that one. And yeah, I mentioned before it was a win for each of the top four. It was actually a win for each of the top six. Fifth place, Motherwell beat St Johnstone 2-1. Jack, Stuart Kettlewell's done all well from already so far this season.
Yeah, Motherwell have done really well again. Obviously, having an excellent first half, going 2-0 up against St Johnstone, going into half time. I felt like Stuart Kettlewell was doing a really good job at Motherwell. I feel like for Motherwell as a club, they're always objective is to kind of stay away from the relegation spots at the bottom of the table. So to kind of finish between 5th place and 8th place every season. But Stuart Kettlewell's doing a really good job that maybe Motherwell could try push for the European places this season. Obviously, they pushed for it in 2022 and they managed to get into Europe. Obviously, their journey didn't last very long, but I think Stuart Kettlewell is the man to get them back into the European spots. And maybe go on a run in the Conference League next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, Stuart Kettlewell all too well. He has started really strong this season. I think it was a kind of evidence of, as we were just talking about with Don Cowie, that Motherwell didn't pull the trigger too early when there were some poor results last season, in the middle of last season, and a few people were saying that it was time for change. But he steadied the ship last season, and he's more than doing so this season, with it looking like a top half finish could well and truly be on.
Yeah, 100%. Like Jack, I've been very impressed with Motherwell this season. I think Kettlewell's kind of always had that in him. Even when he was our manager, he was very, very young when he was Ross County manager, and I think as time's gone on, he's got better as well. And I think just he sets up his teams. Not basically, but you would struggle to go and see a Motherwell performance in his tenure where they've gone out and not done the basics well, is what I would say. And I think that's credit to the way he sets up his team. And yeah, it's a great result. I think Motherwell would say, a team of like them, they want to be and need to be winning all their games against teams, like the likes of Ross County and St Johnstone. So to do that, especially when St Johnstone have been on a bit of an upturn of form recently, although that seems to have flattened out a bit. But yeah, and I've been very, very impressed with Maswanise. Not sure about my pronunciation there.
Better than mine.
Yeah, but he's been terrific of late. 3 goals so far this season in just 5 starts, I think, and an assist as well. And been a real breath of fresh air up top for Motherwell. And if he can continue the form he's in, then I see no reason why they can't go and grab themselves a top 6 finish.
Yeah, absolutely, and not only Maswanise. but also Coletta has started performing pretty well. Jack, Stuart O'Donnell, obviously. Stuart O'Donnell, where that's come from. Stephen O'Donnell is
Yeah.
obviously injured at the moment, but I think our resident Motherwell fan, or one of them, Gogsy, has said that when he returns, Coletta will keep him out of the team anyways.
Yeah, I feel like Motherwell, the team that Motherwell are playing right now seems to be very good. Especially players like they're trying to bring through young players, like they've got Lennon Miller, who's such an exciting prospect player coming through Motherwell, came up through the academy. And obviously he's provided a lot of big moments. He scored in the last minute to put them through to the cup semi final at Hampden, and also Motherwell have also done really well this season. They've been unlucky both times they've played Rangers. They played them at Hampden earlier in the season, and they only lost 2-1. And then in the semi final, they had the lead against them for the full first half before Rangers managed to get back into the game. But I feel like Stuart Kettlewell is building that side at Motherwell that's got the belief where they can push forward and, as I was mentioning there earlier, try get the places, try get the European places. But I feel like he's doing such a brilliant job at Motherwell, and Motherwell, as you'll know, they don't have the biggest budget in the league. They're more so like with the money that Stuart Kettlewell has, like the budget that he's got, he's doing a very good job at Motherwell.
Yeah, and Peter, as you said before, under Simo Valakari, they started pretty strong, St. Johnstone, and it has flattened out a bit. I mean, he won his first 2 games and has lost the last 3. They've scored in every single one. And, well, they had a goal ruled out in the 92nd minute of this one. But to find yourselves in a rut this early on, even at a club like St. Johnstone, can be quite hard. And they don't exactly have an easy run of fixtures. It can't really be that easy anyways when you're on a run as damning as this. But do you think with Kilmarnock at home next, who we've just been talking about their brilliant performances, then Rangers, then Aberdeen, it's going to be, a kind of time to maybe dig the heels in, and especially for the fans who have kind of got to get to terms with maybe you come away with 0 points from those 3 games, but it's not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah, I would say so. I think, when he came in, I think there was a hope that it would be, a Talleen type appointment and that they would kind of kick on and go on this run of form. It's not really happened. Obviously, they got that massive 3-0 win against ourselves. But even on that day, we had 2 red cards, and I wasn't overly blown away by the way they played. They were solid and obviously got the 3 points and scored 3 goals. So, who am I to slag them off? I think it's interesting. I think they're maybe in a position similar to ourselves in that I don't know if Valakari's really got what he wants available to him. They're playing a sort of a kind of narrow formation at the moment, and it's not really working. As you said, they are scoring goals, but I think you're always going to do that when you have Nicky Clark in your team, and I think he's really been the one who's kind of dragged them through this mini rough patch. And if they're going to get out of it, then they probably will be relying heavily on him. But I think for the St. Johnstone fans who had hoped that Valakari was going to come in and take them up and away from the relegation spots, I think it's maybe a bit of a harsh reality setting in that they might still end up down there.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll move on to the final game then. As I said, 6th place also won. St. Mirren, they took on bottom place Hibs at Easter Road. And Jack, Hibs'd it.
Yeah, well, Hibs, like you could almost call it, as you said, Hibs'd it, typical Hibs, 2-0 down in the game, and there's been going to be real questions getting asked about David Gray, the Hibs manager, whether he is the right man for the job. I know Hibs, like behind the scenes right now, are not in the best position. But to go 2-0 down to St Mirren, they nearly clawed it back as well. Like Nicky Cadden converted in the last kick of the game, or in injury time, converted a penalty, and then they ran up the pitch and managed to put the ball in the net to make it two each, where it was ruled out by VAR for offside. But I feel like Hibs were, you could almost say it was a pretty lackluster performance. They just never really had anything to create, and it only looked like when they equalised at the 94th minute, or not equalised, sorry, when they got the goal in the 94th minute to make it 2-1, it's almost like they seem to have switched on and gained a spark that they could go on in the game. And obviously they found the net, but it was an offside.
Yeah, and I reluctantly turned down voice clips from Innes, our Hibs fan, but I didn't want to put him through that pain and reliving any of the weekend. But Peter, yeah, as Jack touched on there, they nearly clawed it back. I think Martin Boyle missed the penalty. They then score the penalty with Nicky Cadden, and then he scores again, but this one's ruled out by VAR. But Innes said, not in his voice notes because I did turn them down, as I said, but he did say that if Hibs had taken anything from that, it would have been an absolute robbery. The players just aren't playing for David Gray at the moment, but Hibs have since come out with a statement saying, I know times are tough, but dig in because times might get a bit tougher. We're sticking with him.
Yeah, first and foremost, I would like to put on record Ellery Balcombe in the St Mirren goal. Justice served for that penalty award, in my opinion. I think that is classic Martin Boyle, going down far too easily. Throws himself to the deck, not having that. And he missed his penalty, so karma where karma's due. But on the David Gray situation, I think, yeah, it's such a strange one because in any other scenario, in any other team, probably would have been sacked by now. But the fact that Hibs have all summer spoken about this, all they've done over the past few years is chop and change managers, and they've spoken from upstairs about trying to have a bit of longevity and patience about with who's in the job. Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't think if I was a Hibs fan, I certainly wouldn't be happy. I think the fact that David Gray is such a club legend is probably helping him in terms of the length of time he's staying in the job. But there has to come a point where, if Hibs don't kick on and have an upturn of results in the next few weeks and they remain bottom of the table, they have to evaluate the situation. However, what I will say is that I think there are much deeper rooted issues at Hibs at the moment, and I think no matter who was going to be in charge from the start of the season, chances are they would have ended up in this situation as well, which is a shame.
Yeah, it's a bit of a poison chalice, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. I think it was maybe in a way it was kind of destined to always go this way. But yeah, it's certainly a rough patch for Hibs fans at the moment. You could argue that they were unlucky with that goal getting chopped off, but yeah, first and foremost, their performances just haven't been good enough.
Yeah, and yeah, not to kind of be too doom and gloom then, I suppose, but we'll do the St Mirren bit. And Conor McMenamin gets 2 goals. Jack, a strong performance, although it was Hibs, and Hibs probably aren't up to what they would want their standards to be. You can only beat what's in front of you, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, St Mirren done excellent again against Hibs. We know that they beat them 3-0 early in the season at the Smizer. But they've definitely, St Mirren are showing signs, although they have had some difficult results, like as Peter was mentioning, a 0-0 draw to Ross County at home, maybe from a St Mirren perspective, isn't their best result. But it's definitely St Mirren are doing they've done an excellent job to get a win against Hibs away at Easter Road, which we know is always a hard place to go. It's a hard place to go for Celtic, Rangers, Hearts. It's a hard stadium to win at, and St Mirren have done a really good job to come away from that game with the 3 points.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. And if we just go through the table, then Celtic and Aberdeen sit on 31 points, Rangers 9 points behind on 22. Dundee United, Motherwell, and St Mirren make up the top 6. Dundee, Kilmarnock, and Ross County are all on 12 points. St Johnstone 10. Hearts sit in the playoff spot at in second last. And Hibs on 8, sit rock bottom. Peter, you said you thought it was always going to go this way, but do you think it'll continue to go this way for Hibs?
I think if they don't make a change, then I think they'll definitely be down in the bottom 3 spots. I think there's potential for a bit of movement there. So I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be glued to the bottom end for the foreseeable. They could still stay up, but I think it might be one of those seasons where they might have to depend on other teams getting dragged into it instead of themselves battling out of it.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much to Peter and Jack for joining me tonight. The top 6 fairly enjoyed their week. The bottom 6 not so much. Hibs'd it, and Andy Halliday can sleep fine this weekend knowing he has no controversies. Goodbye.